Dr. Zixara Thess pressed her crystal fingers against the observation deck's cool metal surface. Through the thick glass, she watched the mining crews work far below on asteroid Kepler 442c. Her tall, angular body gleamed with the natural blue light that all Veltar people produced. As the station's head xenobiologist, she studied every species that worked for the Galactic Mining Consortium. The humans fascinated her most. They were such strange creatures. Small compared to most intelligent species, with soft pink skin that bruised easily. They had no natural armor like the hegemony reptilians. They could not share thoughts like the Zephyrite clusters. They could not become pure energy like the Luminari. Yet somehow these weak beings had survived on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Zixara watched a human named Marcus Chen direct his team near the main drilling site. He was average height for his species, with dark hair and brown eyes. His mining suit was patched in several places. Like all humans, he looked fragile. But she had noticed something odd about him and his kind. They worked differently than other species. The hegemony workers followed orders with perfect logic. If a task was too dangerous, they simply refused. The Zephyrites moved as one mind, never taking individual risks. The Luminari calculated the best outcome for their energy forms. But humans did unexpected things. Last week, she had watched Marcus climb into a damaged drill to save a trapped Zephyrite worker. The risk was enormous. The drill could have collapsed completely. But Marcus went anyway. When she asked him why through the communication system, he just said, "Someone had to help." This made no sense to Zixara. In her species, individuals only helped others when it benefited the group. Personal sacrifice for strangers was illogical. Yet humans did it constantly. She made notes on her datapad. Human subject continues to display irrational protective behavior toward other species. No clear evolutionary advantage observed. The asteroid shook slightly. This was normal. The mining operations created small vibrations throughout the rock. Zixara had felt thousands of these tremors during her 2 years on the station. She continued watching the work crews. Marcus was training a new hegemony worker on the deep mining equipment. The reptilian stood 8 feet tall with thick green scales and claws that could tear through metal. Yet Marcus spoke to him with patience, showing him each control multiple times. The hegemony worker clearly found the humans' teaching methods inefficient. But Marcus kept explaining anyway. Humans waste significant time on individual instruction. Zixara muttered to herself. More efficient to simply download the information directly. But she had to admit, the workers that Marcus trained seemed to perform better than others. Even the logical hegemony workers appeared to care more about their tasks after working with humans. This was another puzzle. The station's main computer announced the shift change. Zixara watched as the day crews prepared to leave the deep mining areas. In 4 hours, the night shift would take over. She planned to continue her observations then. Suddenly, the asteroid shook violently. This was not a normal mining vibration. Zixara's crystals flashed red with alarm as she grabbed the observation deck's railing. Warning lights began flashing throughout the station. The main screen showed a massive collapse in Tunnel 7, the deepest mining area. A section of the asteroid's core had given way, trapping the workers who were still down there. Zixara's advanced hearing picked up the emergency alarms echoing through the station's corridors. She quickly accessed the worker location system. 14 beings were trapped, 5 humans, 3 hegemony workers, 4 Zephyrite, and 2 Luminari. The collapsed section was completely cut off from the main station. The emergency sensors showed that the trapped area was intact but sealed. Station Commander Veltoth, a massive hegemony leader, appeared on the communication screens throughout the facility. His deep voice echoed from the speakers. "We have a major collapse in Tunnel 7. 14 workers are trapped but alive. Rescue teams are being organized. Estimated time to reach the trapped section is 72 hours. All non-essential personnel must evacuate to safe areas." 72 hours. Zixara's scientific mind immediately calculated the survival odds. The hegemony workers could enter hibernation and survive for weeks. The Luminari could reduce their energy needs and last almost as long. The Zephyrite could slow their group metabolism. But humans needed constant air, water, and food. Their bodies were too inefficient for long-term survival in confined spaces. In 72 hours, they would be dead. She switched her observation equipment to the emergency sensors in the collapsed area. The image was grainy and broken, but she could see movement. The trapped workers were alive and moving around in a space about the size of a large room. Through the static, she could hear voices. The universal translator was damaged, but she caught fragments of speech. Marcus Chen was talking. His voice sounded calm and steady, not panicked like she would expect from someone facing death. Need to check everyone for injuries first. Then we figure out our resources. The hegemony workers had already begun their hibernation process. They found comfortable positions and slowed their breathing. Their scales shifted to a darker color as their bodies prepared for the long wait. The Zephyrites clustered together, their 4 individual forms connecting into their emergency group mind. They became very still, sharing their life energy to last as long as possible. The 2 luminari floated near the ceiling, their bright forms dimming to conserve energy. They spoke in their musical language, calculating their chances of survival. But the humans were doing something different. Marcus had gathered the 4 other humans together. Instead of panicking or giving up, they were organizing. Zixara watched in confusion as they began examining every inch of their prison. They checked the walls, the ceiling, the floor. They gathered pieces of broken equipment and sorted them into piles. What are they doing? She whispered to herself. Through the broken communication system, she heard Marcus talking to his team. Sarah, check if any of this equipment still works. Tom, see if you can find any gaps in the walls. Lisa, inventory our water and food. Jake, help me look for loose rocks we can move. They were not accepting their fate. Instead of preparing to die, they were looking for ways to live. This behavior made no logical sense. Every calculation showed that escape was impossible. The rockfall was too massive. The space was too sealed. Yet the humans acted as if they could change these facts through effort alone. Over the next few hours, Zixara watched the humans work with an intensity that amazed her. They moved rocks with their bare hands, trying to clear small gaps. They took apart broken equipment to look for useful parts. They shared their small amount of food and water equally, not just among themselves but with the other species. When one of the hegemony workers briefly woke from hibernation, Marcus offered him water from the humans' limited supply. The reptilian looked confused by this gesture. His species only shared resources when it was logically beneficial. But Marcus just smiled and insisted. We're all in this together, Marcus said. Zixara had studied human behavior for 2 years, but she had never seen anything like this. Faced with certain death, they were not giving up. They were not conserving their energy like logical beings. Instead, they were fighting against impossible odds with nothing but their will to survive. As she watched Marcus lead his team in their desperate efforts, Zixara began to understand that she might be witnessing something unprecedented. These humans were not just trying to survive. They were trying to save everyone, including species that considered them inferior. For the first time in her scientific career, Zixara found herself hoping that her calculations were wrong. She wanted these strange, illogical creatures to succeed, even though every law of physics said they could not. The real test of human nature was just beginning. 24 hours had passed since the collapse. Zixara had not left her observation post. She had barely moved, watching the trapped workers through the damaged sensors. Her crystal body ached from staying in one position, but she could not look away. The situation was getting worse. The air in the trapped section was getting thin. The emergency life support systems had failed completely. The 14 beings were now surviving on whatever oxygen had been trapped with them when the rocks fell. Zixara calculated that the humans had maybe 18 hours of air left. The other species could last longer by slowing their body functions, but the humans were burning through oxygen at their normal rate. She expected them to panic now. Any logical species would realize the hopelessness of their situation and prepare for death. But the humans were doing something even stranger than before. They were taking care of everyone else. Marcus had organized the humans into teams. One team worked constantly to move rocks and debris, trying to create better air circulation. Another team took care of the other species, making sure they were comfortable and safe. The third team searched for any possible escape routes, but the most shocking thing was how they treated their alien companions. The Zephyrites had a problem. Their group mind worked best when all 4 individuals were close together. But the collapse had damaged their connection. One of the 4, a being called Zexta, was trapped under some rocks. He was alive but could not move to rejoin his group. Without him, the other 3 Zephyrites were becoming confused and scared. Their shared thoughts were broken. They were starting to panic, which used up more oxygen. Marcus saw the problem immediately. He crawled over to where Zexta was trapped and began moving rocks with his bare hands. The rocks were heavy and sharp. Marcus's soft human skin was soon bleeding from dozens of cuts. "You don't have to do this," Zexta said through the translator. "Your species cannot survive as long as mine. You should save your energy." Marcus paused in his work, breathing heavily. "Maybe," he said, wiping blood from his hands. "But if I don't help you, your friends will panic and use up everyone's air faster. We all live together or we all die together." This logic amazed Zixara. Marcus was right. If the Zephyrites panicked, they would breathe faster and consume more oxygen. By helping them, Marcus was actually helping everyone survive longer. But she doubted he had calculated this. He was just helping because someone needed help. It took Marcus 4 hours to free Zexta. By the end, his hands were torn and bleeding. His mining suit was damaged. He was exhausted. But when Zexta rejoined his group and their connection was restored, all 4 Zephyrites immediately calmed down. The air lasted longer because of Marcus's sacrifice. But the humans were not done surprising her. The 2 Luminari had a different problem. As energy beings, they needed to stay warm to maintain their form. The trapped area was getting colder as the life support systems failed. If they got too cold, they would lose their shape and possibly die. The humans noticed this too. Sarah Chen, Marcus's wife, came up with a solution. She gathered all the humans together and had them exercise in shifts. They did jumping jacks, push-ups, and running in place. This raised their body temperature and warmed the air around them. Then they positioned themselves around the Luminari, using their body heat to keep the energy beings warm. This made no sense to Zixara. The humans needed to conserve their energy and oxygen. Exercising used up both faster, but they were willing to shorten their own lives to save beings who could become pure energy and possibly survive without physical form. When one of the Luminari asked why they were doing this, Sarah just smiled. "Because you're cold," she said, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. The humans also took care of the hegemony workers. The 3 reptilians had entered deep hibernation to conserve energy, but they needed their body temperature to stay stable. The humans used pieces of their own clothing to cover the sleeping reptilians, keeping them warm. Tom and Jake, 2 of the human miners, spent hours positioning debris to create windbreaks around the hibernating hegemony workers. They did this even though the reptilians could not know or appreciate their efforts. "They're not even awake," Zixara muttered to herself. "The humans are wasting energy on beings who cannot thank them." But as she watched, she began to understand something deeper. The humans were not helping others to get something back. They were helping because that was what humans did. 40 hours after the collapse, things got much worse. A second, smaller collapse happened. Part of the ceiling cracked and began to fall. Everyone was in danger, but the Zephyrite cluster was directly under the falling rocks. Marcus saw it happening. He was on the other side of the trapped area, working on clearing debris. He could have stayed safe, but instead he ran directly toward the danger. Zixara watched in horror as Marcus threw himself over the 4 Zephyrites just as the rocks began to fall. His human body was soft and weak compared to the crushing stones, but he covered the alien beings with his own form, using himself as a shield. The rocks hit Marcus hard. His mining suit cracked. The impact drove him to his knees, but he stayed in place, protecting the Zephyrites until the collapse stopped. When the dust settled, Marcus was badly hurt. His left arm was clearly broken. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his head. But the Zephyrites were safe. Why? Zexta asked him through the translator. "Why did you risk your life for us? Your species and ours are not allies. We do not even like each other." Marcus leaned against the wall, holding his broken arm. He was breathing hard and obviously in pain, but he smiled at the Zephyrite. "Doesn't matter if we like each other," he said. "You're alive. That's what matters." Zixara stared at the screen in complete shock. She had just watched a human deliberately risk his life to save beings from a species that considered humans inferior. Marcus had gained nothing from this action. He had only hurt himself, but the other humans were not surprised by Marcus's behavior. They immediately came to help him, treating his injuries and making him comfortable. To them, what he had done was normal. Sarah helped bandage Marcus's arm using strips torn from her own clothing. "You scared me," she told him quietly. "Sorry," Marcus said, "but I couldn't let them get hurt." "I know," Sarah replied. "That's why I love you." Zixara realized she was witnessing something that had never been documented in galactic civilization. Here was a species that would sacrifice themselves for others, even enemies, without expecting anything in return. They did it not because of logic or calculation, but because of something they called love. As the hours passed and the air grew thinner, the humans continued to work. They shared their water with everyone. They gave up their food rations to keep the other species strong. They used their own body heat to warm their alien companions, and Marcus, with his broken arm and bleeding face, continued to lead them. Zixara began to understand that she was not just watching a survival situation. She was witnessing the true nature of humanity. These beings did not just fight to live. They fought to make sure others could live too, even when it meant they would die first. 48 hours had passed since the collapse. The air in the trapped section was now dangerously thin. Zixara could see through her sensors that everyone was moving more slowly. Their voices were weaker when they spoke. The humans should have been dead by now. According to every scientific calculation, their primitive biology could not survive this long with so little oxygen. But somehow, they were still alive and still working. Marcus Chen sat against a wall, his broken arm held close to his chest. His face was pale and covered with sweat. Every breath was a struggle, but his eyes were still alert, still watching over his team and the alien workers. "We need to talk," he said to the group. His voice was barely a whisper through the damaged communication system. Everyone gathered around him, the humans, the conscious Zephyrite, and one luminary who had dimmed almost to nothing. The 3 hegemony workers remained in hibernation, their thick scales now almost black as their bodies prepared for long-term survival. Marcus looked at each of them. "The air is almost gone," he said. "We have maybe 6 hours left." Sarah Chen knelt beside her husband. "The rescue teams won't reach us for another day," she said quietly. Marcus nodded. "I know." He paused, gathering his strength. "But there might be a way." He pointed to a section of the wall where the humans had been working for 2 days. "Behind that wall is the main ventilation shaft for this section of the asteroid. If we can break through, we can manually redirect airflow to this area." Tom, one of the miners, shook his head. "Marcus, we looked at that wall. It's 3 feet of solid rock and twisted metal. We can't break through with our hands." "Not through the wall," Marcus said. "Above it." He pointed upward to where the ceiling met the wall. There was a small gap, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. "The explosion cracked the rock up there. I think there's a passage that leads to the ventilation system." Zixara adjusted her sensors to look at the area Marcus indicated. He was right. Her instruments detected a narrow crack that might lead to the main air system. But the passage was extremely dangerous. The gap was only 18 inches wide. It was filled with sharp, twisted metal from the collapsed support beams. Toxic gases from the damaged processing systems were leaking into it. The whole area was unstable and could collapse completely at any moment. "It's impossible," said Zexta, speaking for his Zephyrite group. "The passage is too narrow. The metal will cut anyone who tries to crawl through. The toxic gases will kill within minutes." "And even if someone made it through," added the Luminari, "the manual controls for the ventilation system require physical manipulation. Our energy forms cannot operate solid machinery." Marcus looked at the passage for a long time. Zixara could see him calculating distances and risks. Finally, he spoke. "You're right, it's impossible for most of us." He paused. "But humans are small. We might fit through the gap." Sarah grabbed his good arm. "Marcus, no. Look at that metal. It's like razor wire. You'll be cut to pieces before you get halfway through." "And the gases," added Jake, another human miner. "Your suit is already damaged. You'll be breathing poison." Marcus smiled weakly at his wife. "I know, but someone has to try. If we don't, we all die anyway." He struggled to his feet, wincing as his broken arm shifted. "I've been in tight spaces before. I know how to move carefully." "Then I'm going with you," Sarah said immediately. "No," Marcus's voice was firm. If something happens to me, the group will need a leader. That has to be you. Tom stepped forward. I'll go. I'm smaller than you and my suit isn't damaged. I should go, said Lisa, the team's engineer. I know the ventilation systems better than anyone. Marcus looked at his teammates with something that might have been pride. You would all volunteer, wouldn't you? They nodded without hesitation. Zixara stared at the screen in amazement. She was watching 5 humans, each facing certain death, and every one of them was willing to sacrifice themselves for the group. This behavior was so far outside normal galactic psychology that she had no framework to understand it. This is what I don't understand about your species, said Zexida. You act as if each individual life is worth saving, even when logic says some must be sacrificed for the good of many. Marcus considered this. Maybe that's the difference between us and everyone else, he said. We don't accept that some people have to die. We try to save everyone even when it's impossible. But why? Asked the Luminari. What evolutionary advantage does this behavior provide? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I don't know about evolution, he said finally. I just know that if we don't try to save each other, what's the point of being alive at all? He began moving toward the dangerous passage. I'm going. That's final. But as he reached the wall, something unexpected happened. Tom grabbed his good arm. No, Tom said. I'm going first. Before Marcus could stop him, Tom began climbing toward the narrow gap. I'm younger and faster, Tom called back. If I can't make it, you can try after me. Marcus started to follow, but Jake and Lisa held him back. Let him try, Lisa said. You're too hurt already. Zixara watched as Tom squeezed into the narrow passage. Almost immediately she heard him cry out in pain. The twisted metal was cutting through his mining suit like it was paper. But he kept moving forward. Through the sensors, she could track his progress. Tom was crawling on his belly through a tunnel of sharp steel, breathing toxic gases, with tons of unstable rock above his head. Every movement caused more cuts. His suit's life support was failing, but he kept going. Tom, Sarah called through the communication system. How are you doing? I'm okay, came Tom's voice, weak and strained. I can see the ventilation controls ahead. Just a little further. Zixara could tell he was lying. Her instrument showed that Tom was losing blood rapidly. The toxic gases were affecting his nervous system. His movements were becoming slower and less coordinated, but still, he crawled forward. I can reach the controls, Tom reported. His voice was barely audible now. I'm going to try to redirect the airflow. For several minutes, there was only silence. Then suddenly fresh air began flowing into the trapped area. Tom had succeeded. Tom, Marcus called. Tom, can you hear me? You did it. Now come back. But there was no response. Zixara's sensors showed the truth that the others could not yet see. Tom was still alive, but he was trapped in the passage. His damaged suit had caught on the twisted metal. He was too weak from blood loss and poison to free himself. He had saved everyone else, but he could not save himself. Marcus realized this at the same time. Without saying a word, he began climbing toward the passage. Marcus, no! Sarah grabbed him. You can't help him. You'll just get trapped too. Marcus looked at his wife with eyes full of pain. I can't leave him there. You have to, she said, tears streaming down her face. Tom chose to go. He knew the risk. Don't make his sacrifice meaningless. Marcus stared at the passage where his friend was dying. Zixara could see the war happening inside him, the desperate need to help against the logic of survival. Finally, Marcus spoke to the passage. Tom, can you hear me? A weak voice came back. I'm here, Marcus. Did it work? Is everyone getting air? Yes, Marcus said, his voice breaking. You saved us all. Good, Tom whispered. That's good. Tell my parents I did something important. I will, Marcus promised. Those were the last words Tom ever spoke. Zixara had watched one human die to save 13 other beings, most of whom belonged to species that considered humans inferior. She had seen others willing to make the same sacrifice, and she was beginning to understand that this was not unusual behavior for humans. It was what made them human. Fresh air flowed into the trapped area, but it came at a terrible cost. Tom's sacrifice had bought them time, but everyone knew the victory was temporary. The manually redirected air would only last so long before the system shut down again. Zixara watched through her sensors as the survivors dealt with Tom's death. The alien species reacted in predictable ways. The Zephyrate incorporated the experience into their group memory with logical acceptance. The Luminary calculated the statistical value of Tom's sacrifice. The hibernating hegemony workers remained unaware, but the humans did something completely different. They gathered around the passage where Tom had died. Sarah, Lisa, and Jake formed a circle with Marcus in the center. They did not speak about calculations or logic. Instead, they spoke about Tom as a person. He always shared his lunch, Sarah said quietly, even when he didn't have much. He taught me how to fix the drill circuits, added Lisa. He was patient when I made mistakes. He loved baseball, Jake said. He talked about playing catch with his son when he got home. Marcus listened to each story, his face gray with pain and exhaustion. His broken arm hung useless at his side. Blood still leaked from the cuts on his head. But he was listening to every word about his friend. Tom was a good man, Marcus said finally. He died so we could live. That means we have to live well. We have to make his sacrifice count. Zixara realized she was witnessing another human behavior that had no equivalent in galactic civilization. The humans were not just recording Tom's death for statistical purposes. They were honoring his memory, keeping his spirit alive through their words and actions. But their situation was still desperate. 60 hours had passed since the collapse. The rescue teams had contacted them through the emergency communication system. The good news was that they were making progress. The bad news was that they still needed 12 more hours to break through. 12 hours they did not have. The redirected air was already starting to fail. Tom had managed to restart one ventilation fan, but the system was damaged and unstable. Soon they would be back to breathing the thin, stale air of their prison. Marcus gathered everyone together again. His voice was weaker now, but his determination had not changed. We need to get someone else to the main ventilation controls, he said. Tom opened one pathway, but there are 3 more air systems that could help us. Marcus, no, Sarah said immediately. The passage is blocked now. Tom's body is in the way, and even if we could get through, the other ventilation shafts are even more dangerous. Marcus looked at the damaged ceiling above them, not the passage. Up there. He pointed to a section where the collapse had created a vertical shaft leading upward. It was narrow and filled with loose rocks, but it might connect to the main air systems. That's worse than the passage, Jake said. It's completely unstable. One wrong move and the whole thing could come down on us. And it's a 30-foot climb, added Lisa. Straight up with nothing to hold on to but loose rocks. Marcus studied the shaft carefully. I've done worse climbs. Not with a broken arm and half your blood on the outside of your body, Sarah said angrily. Marcus, you can barely stand up. Then one of you will have to go, Marcus said simply. The other humans looked at each other. Zixara could see the same determination in their faces that she had seen in Tom. They were all willing to try the impossible climb. But before anyone could volunteer, something unexpected happened. One of the hegemony workers emerged from hibernation. The massive reptilian scales shifted from black to dark green as he awakened. His name was Gorthak, and he was the largest being in the trapped area. I heard voices, Gorthak said in his deep, rumbling voice. The communication system woke me. What has happened? Marcus quickly explained the situation. He told Gorthak about Tom's sacrifice and the failing air systems. He described the dangerous climb that someone would have to make. Gorthak listened without speaking. When Marcus finished, the hegemony worker was quiet for a long time. This human, Tom, Gorthak said finally. He died to save us all? Yes, Marcus replied. Including my people who were unconscious and could not thank him. Yes. Gorthak looked at the humans with something like wonder in his large yellow eyes. In my species, we have a concept called the life debt. When someone saves your life, you owe them yours in return. This human Tom has created a debt that I can never repay. He stood to his full 8-foot height, his thick muscles moving under his armored scales. But I can honor his memory. What do you mean? Asked Sarah. Gorthak pointed to the vertical shaft. You are right that the climb is dangerous for humans. Your species is small and weak, but I am large and strong. My claws can grip the rock. My scales can protect me from falling debris. Marcus stared at the hegemony worker. You're volunteering to make the climb? The human Tom died for me while I slept, Gorthak said. The least I can do is risk my life while I am awake. This was unprecedented. Zixara had never heard of a hegemony worker volunteering for a dangerous task to help other species. Their culture was based on logical self-interest and hierarchy. But this one was willing to risk everything because a human had shown him kindness. Gorthak began climbing the unstable shaft. His large claws found purchase on the loose rocks. His thick scales protected him when debris fell. But the climb was incredibly dangerous. Each movement caused small rock falls. The shaft groaned and shifted under his weight. Gorthak, Marcus called up to him. Be careful. We can't lose you too. I am being careful, little human, came the reply. But if I fall, know that I died trying to repay Tom's kindness. Zixara watched in fascination as the hegemony worker climbed higher. She was witnessing something that should have been impossible. A logical, self-interested species member risking his life because he had been inspired by human behavior. Halfway up the shaft, disaster struck. A large section of rock broke loose and began to fall. Gorthak could not move fast enough to avoid it. The stone crashed into his back, nearly knocking him from the wall. Gorthak, Sarah screamed. The hegemony worker hung by his claws, blood running down his scales. But after a moment he began climbing again. I am still alive, he called down. Tom climbed through worse to save us. Near the top of the shaft, Gorthak reached the connection to the main air systems. But the controls were designed for human-sized hands, not his massive claws. He worked carefully, trying not to damage the delicate equipment. I can see the ventilation controls, he reported, but they are very small. I will try to activate them. For several tense minutes, everyone listened to the sounds of Gorthak working above them. Then, one by one, the remaining air systems came online. Fresh air began flowing into the trapped area from multiple directions. I have done it, Gorthak called down. The air will flow now. But when he tried to climb back down, another section of the shaft collapsed. Gorthak fell 20 feet, crashing into the floor of their prison. His thick scales had protected him from the worst damage, but he was badly injured. The humans immediately surrounded him, using their torn clothing to bandage his wounds. They gave him their remaining water and made him as comfortable as possible. Why? Gorthak asked, wincing as Lisa cleaned a cut on his arm. Why do you help me? I am not your species. Marcus knelt beside the injured hegemony worker. Because you helped us, he said simply. Because Tom would want us to take care of you. Because that's what friends do. Friends? Gorthak repeated the word slowly as if testing its meaning. Friends? Marcus confirmed. Zixara stared at the scene below. She was watching a human with a broken arm and severe injuries caring for a member of a species that had enslaved and exploited humanity for decades. And the hegemony worker was accepting this care with something that looked like gratitude. 2 hours later, the rescue teams finally broke through. The 14 trapped workers were brought to safety, but Zixara knew that something far more important than a rescue had taken place in that collapsed tunnel. She had watched Tom die to save others. She had seen Marcus willing to sacrifice himself again and again. She had witnessed Gorthak risk his life because he had been inspired by human courage. And she was beginning to understand that humans possessed something that no other species in the galaxy had. The ability to make others want to be better than they were. As the medical teams carried Marcus away on a stretcher, Zixara heard him speaking weakly to the rescue workers. Take care of Gorthak, he said. He's a hero. The hegemony worker, being carried on another stretcher, heard this. His yellow eyes found Marcus across the rescue area. No, small human, Gorthak said. You and Tom are the heroes. I merely learned how to be brave by watching you. Zixara realized that in 72 hours, she had witnessed something that would change her understanding of life itself. She had seen the true power of humanity, and it was not their technology or their adaptability. It was their ability to love others so much that they would die for them, and in doing so, they inspired others to become capable of love as well. 3 months later, Dr. Zixara Thess stood before the Galactic Science Council on the capital world of New Geneva. The massive chamber held representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Her crystal body reflected the chamber's lights as she prepared to present her findings about the mining station incident. She had spent weeks writing her report, but she knew that her conclusions would challenge everything the galactic community believed about humans and survival behavior. "Honored council members," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "I am here to present my findings on the Kepler 442c mining incident and the behavior of human workers during the crisis." The council chairman, a tall Veltar like herself, gestured for her to continue. "Dr. Thess, your preliminary reports have been most unusual. Please explain your conclusions about human psychology under extreme stress." Zixara activated her data display, showing images from the collapsed tunnel. "For 72 hours, I observed 14 beings trapped with limited air and no hope of immediate rescue. According to all established models of survival behavior, we should have seen resource hoarding, panic, and the sacrifice of weaker individuals for the survival of the stronger." She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. "Instead, I witnessed behavior that defies our current understanding of evolutionary psychology." A hegemony representative raised his clawed hand. "Dr. Thess, are you suggesting that humans do not follow standard survival instincts?" "I am suggesting that humans have evolved beyond standard survival instincts," Zixara replied. "They have developed what can only be described as voluntary self-sacrifice for the benefit of others, including members of species they barely know." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. The concept was almost impossible for most species to understand. "Could you provide specific examples?" asked a Zephyrite cluster mind. Zixara showed video recordings from the incident. Human Tom Martinez voluntarily crawled through a deadly passage to restore airflow, knowing he would likely die in the process. He did die, but he saved 13 other beings first. She continued with more footage. Human Marcus Chen repeatedly risked his life to protect and aid alien workers. He threw himself between falling rocks and Zephyrite workers. He used his body heat to keep luminary beings warm. He shared scarce resources with hibernating hegemony workers who could not even thank him. The chamber was completely silent now. Everyone was watching the footage of Marcus's actions during the crisis. But the most significant finding, Zixara continued, was the effect of human behavior on other species. "Observe." She showed footage of Gorthak emerging from hibernation and volunteering for the dangerous climb. This hegemony worker abandoned his species' logical survival protocols because he was inspired by human sacrifice. He risked his life to honor the memory of a human who died to save him. The hegemony representative stood up, his scales flushing with agitation. "Dr. Thess, you are suggesting that human behavior can override millions of years of hegemony evolution." "This is impossible, is it?" Zixara asked. "Gorthak is here today. Perhaps he can explain his actions better than I can." To everyone's surprise, the massive hegemony worker entered the chamber. Gorthak had recovered from his injuries, but he now wore an unusual medallion around his neck, a small piece of metal that had belonged to Tom Martinez. "Honored Council," Gorthak said in his deep voice, "I request permission to speak." The chairman, clearly shocked, granted permission. Hegemony workers rarely spoke at council meetings unless ordered to do so. "I was trapped with these humans for 3 days," Gorthak began. "I expected them to behave like all logical species, to conserve resources, to sacrifice the weak, to prioritize their own survival." He paused, touching the medallion. "Instead, I watched them share their food with beings who considered them inferior. I saw them risk their lives for strangers. I witnessed one of them die to save the rest of us, including me." The chamber was completely silent. When I awoke and learned what the human Tom had done, I felt something I had never experienced before. My species has no word for it, but humans call it guilt. The idea that someone had died for me while I slept safely was unbearable. Gorthak looked directly at the hegemony representative. "So I chose to climb the unstable shaft, not because logic demanded it, but because I wanted to honor Tom's sacrifice. I wanted to be worthy of the life he had given me." He turned back to the council. "The humans did not just survive that crisis. They changed everyone who survived with them. They made us want to be better than we were." After Gorthak left, the Zephyrite representative requested to speak. "Dr. Thess, we have our own testimony to add." 4 Zephyrites entered the chamber, moving in perfect synchronization. Zixara recognized them as the workers from the incident. We are Zexta, Zema, Zelko, and Zura. They spoke in unison. We were trapped with the humans. When our connection was broken and we faced panic and death, human Marcus Chen used his own body to free our trapped member. Their voices took on an unusual tone, one that Zixara had never heard from Zephyrite before. We have incorporated the memory of human Tom Martinez into our collective consciousness. His willingness to die for others has become part of our shared mind. The lead Zephyrite continued alone. The humans taught us that individual sacrifice for the group is not just about survival statistics. It is about something they call love. We are still learning what this means, but we know it makes us stronger. Finally, two luminary energy beings floated into the chamber. Their usual bright glow was softer somehow, more warm than brilliant. We are Luxara and Lumseth, they said in their musical voices. We also survived because of human kindness. When we were too cold to maintain our energy forms, the humans used their own body heat to warm us. They shortened their own lives to extend ours, the second luminary added. They gained nothing from this action except the knowledge that we would survive. In our species, we call this perfect energy transfer, giving without receiving. We have learned that humans possess a form of energy we never detected before, the first luminary continued. It cannot be measured by our instruments, but it can transform other beings. They call this energy hope. After all the testimony, the council chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives argued and debated, trying to understand the implications of what they had heard. Finally, the chairman called for order. Dr. Thess, what do you recommend based on your findings? Zixara had been preparing for this question for months. Honored Chairman, I believe we must completely revise our understanding of human capabilities. They are not just another species that survived a harsh environment. They are a species that has evolved the ability to inspire other species to transcend their biological limitations. She paused, looking around the chamber. In the 72 hours I observed them, humans converted logical hegemony workers into heroes. They taught Zephyrite cluster minds about individual sacrifice. They showed luminary energy beings the power of physical kindness. What are you suggesting? Asked the Veltar chairman. I am suggesting that humans are not just survivors, Zixara said. They are teachers. They have the ability to spread something they call humanity to other species. And I believe this could change our entire galactic civilization. She looked directly at the chairman. I request permission to establish a new research station on Earth itself. I want to study humans in their natural environment and learn how they develop these extraordinary capabilities. The chairman was quiet for a long moment. Dr. Thess, are you saying that humans could teach other species to behave like humans? I am saying that humans have already begun teaching us, Zixara replied. The question is whether we are willing to learn. 6 months later, Zixara stood on the observation deck of her new research station in Earth's orbit. But she was no longer just observing. She was participating in human culture, learning their concepts of friendship, love, and sacrifice. She had received messages from across the galaxy. Gorthak had been promoted to hegemony leadership and was implementing new cooperation protocols with other species. The Zephyrite cluster had begun teaching their people about individual heroism. The luminary had started sharing their energy freely with other beings in need. On her desk was a simple metal plaque that Marcus Chen had sent her. It read, "In memory of Tom Martinez, he showed us how to be human." Below that, Marcus had written a personal note. "Thank you for understanding what we're trying to do. Tom would be proud that his story is helping others learn about the power of love." Zixara touched the plaque gently with her crystal fingers. She had spent her career studying alien species as scientific specimens, but the humans had taught her that some things could not be understood through observation alone. Some things had to be experienced, some things had to be felt, some things had to be lived. As she watched, the blue planet turning slowly below her station, Zixara realized that she was no longer just a xenobiologist studying humans. She had become something new, a being who had learned to love through human example. And she knew that Tom Martinez's sacrifice in a collapsed tunnel on a distant asteroid had begun something that would spread throughout the galaxy.